Hello and welcome to the Mr. 35mm YouTube channel. I'm your host, Mr. 50mm. Mr. 35mm isn't actually real. He just lives rent-free in my head up there somewhere. Anyways, for today, we are having a look at another film camera, this time the Canon 7E ELAN. The Canon ELAN 7E. A bit of background, I've had this camera for a long time. This was a camera from my university days, and that was a while ago. I actually don't remember how I came to have this camera, but it's here now and we're going to look at it. I also have to admit that using an EF mount autofocusing SLR feels a bit odd to me. I think partly this is because I started my photo taking journey on Canon DSLRs, and it feels a little bit odd to forget the D part of that. I found myself really treating this like any DSLR that I normally would shoot with, and I absolutely ripped through film in doing so. I admit part of this might also be the level of automation built into this camera, but a little bit of it definitely was because the camera kind of just reminded me of my 5D too. And as a result, it felt like I was okay to just shoot fast. With that, let's have a look at the Canon ELAN 7E. So what is this? Well, it's this camera here, the ELAN 7E, a 35mm film SLR made by Canon. It was announced in October of the year 2000. Super future. The shutter on the camera is good for 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second, and the flash sync is good up to 1/125th of a second. The camera can have film input from ISOs of 6 to 6400, and it'll read DX coded canisters. The metering on this camera is done by a 35 zone system, and autofocus is done by a 7-point system, which is augmented by the magic words on the camera right here. Eye control. The camera has a built-in flash, and the GN value for this is 13 at ISO 100 in meters, with a 28mm field of view coverage. Love it when I get these flash details. The camera can shoot it up to 4 FPS, and the OVF of this camera provides 90% vertical coverage and 92% horizontal coverage at 0.7 times magnification. It's powered by two CR123A batteries, and it comes in at 580 grams without the batteries, or a lens. In the year 2000, this came out at 93,000 yen, or roughly 108,000 yen in modern yens. That's around 680 USD, or just under 940 Canadian dollars. The new EOS ELAN 7E with eye control. It comes to life the instant the extraordinary shows its face. Reading your mind and moving with your eye to one of 7 autofocus points in the frame, pinpointing the balance of light based on 11 individual exposure modes and a 35-zone evaluative metering system. See beyond the surface with the world's most comprehensive line of autofocus EF lenses, capturing it with precision at up to 4 frames per second. It will open doors. Are you ready? Extraordinary opportunities surface. Eye control. What is it, and is it just a gimmick? You may have noticed that I said eye control. Correct, I did say that. Confirmed. The ELAN 7E is not Canon's first attempt at this, but it is one of the ones that's implemented on a film camera, so that makes it a little early. If you've heard about it on their modern mirrorless cameras, like on the R3 or R1, it actually is a similar system. Basically, what you can do is look where you want to focus. In the case of the ELAN 7, as long as you look at one of the focus points, in theory, the camera will use a sensor and a set of IR LEDs to read the position of your eyeball and focus where you're looking at, as long as where you're looking at is one of the 7 AF spots. Again, it's a very similar way to the way it was done on the mirrorless cameras, and I'll put up a diagram now of generally the way that the IR LEDs and the sensor is placed. Hopefully it'll help you understand it a little better. At any rate, let's actually have a look at these things fired, because most phones will pick up IR light. They're a bit sensitive to it. So if you put your phone up to this eye cup here, you will typically see, when you half press, the blinky blinkies of IR LEDs. Let's have a look at that now. Additionally, this system, the eye control, works in both single shot and AI servo. If you look at a new spot in your AI servo mode, the camera will just automatically try to focus in that spot. It's actually fairly neat, and if you keep looking at the one spot, it will keep adjusting focus like you would normally do in AI servo. Now, is this actually a useful feature, and does it work well? For me, and my eyeballs that don't wear glasses or contacts, I'm actually a pretty reasonable case for the system, and it did actually work most of the time. Primarily, I was using this looking at the center point a lot because I still like doing focus recompose, and for the most part, the eye control system did do its job. However, I noticed that if I wasn't looking directly with my eyeballs jammed up against this finder and jammed up in the exact same way every time, the system would occasionally miss by usually putting the AF point that it thought I was looking at one up. Apparently, when you calibrate the system, the more you calibrate it, the better the calibration gets, and it'll incorporate something like 20 calibration runs into the calibration data. And this also works by doing calibrations into both horizontal and vertical, so that when you use eye control in either landscape or portrait orientation, the system will generally be able to identify your eye no matter what orientation you're using. But again, I found if I wasn't always jamming my eyeballs in the exact same place, looking the exact same way, and kind of focusing hard in that spot, the system would occasionally pick the wrong spot. And it was at times kind of annoying. And for me, I personally had better luck with this system in landscape orientation. I also found that over time, I'm not sure if it was just me getting lazy or the system drifting calibration, but I would generally get less hits the longer I used the system. I think part of that was me kind of getting more relaxed with the camera and not directly kind of focusing my eyeball where I was trying to focus. But honestly, the system is fun to play with. So it's kind of a neat experience, and overall, I think it does add to the shooting experience. However, if you want to just focus on getting the shots, I would honestly just turn the system off and manually select the points like you would on a normal SLR. Operation and feel. I will start off by saying that there's quite a bit of Canon bias here, but damn, when I started using this, it really felt like I was riding a familiar bicycle. It's a great system. But before we get into that, let's talk about the feel as well. The camera is very solidly built, but it's also pretty light for a modern SLR, I think. And this, I think, is owing to the construction, made in part of anodized aluminum, I believe, on the top plate and front plate. Bottom, I believe, is polycarbonate or plastic of some sort. The grip on this camera is also very nice, well shaped, and pretty comfortable. The only thing that I kind of don't like is that this material on the grip is just hard plastics. It's not rubberized. And overall, that's actually good for longevity because I'm not getting any rubber deterioration, but it's a little less comfortable and it's a little slippery at times, especially when it's cold out. All right, back to controls. Like I said, when I'm using this, it feels like I've always known how to use it. And I actually think it does some things better than some newer Canon DSLRs and some of the mirrorless systems that I've used. But before we get into those, let's talk about the things that are Canon standards. There are 2 command dials. Obviously, one behind your shutter, right there, and a big old one for your thumb in back. However, the rear one does something interesting that you might have noticed. There are directional controls here. It's kind of like the one on the 6D, except this feels better to use. These buttons actually click better. I admit it's missing the center click, but that's forgiven. Now, something you don't see a lot, or you don't see on the DSLRs, is this. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, there you go. AF mode dial. I really like it. It's a quick way to swap between the modes, and honestly, not sure why it's not on. I'm not sure it wasn't incorporated into their DSLRs. Now, another thing that you're not going to see is this one here. That's your eye control toggle. Honestly, I found the placement a tiny bit odd, but overall, easily accessible, and I can get to it with my index finger. Most of the times, you aren't really twiddling this anyways, and you're either having it on or off, so I can live with it the way where it is. Now, one thing that I did notice is the sub display. It's a nice display, has a lot of good info, but there's no backlight. It's not lit. They fixed this on the ELAN 7S. It does have a backlight, but the regular 7E, no dice. Now let's move on to the left side. You have here a mode dial, and there's an interlock on the off position. So you have to press that, give it a twist to change to your other modes. One thing that's nice is that this actually features stacked controls because your drive mode control is right here. Good stuff. And again, this is a control that you don't see on their DSLRs, and I'm kind of sad about that because this drive mode control, it's nice. On the back, there are some more controls. And again, every time I pick this up, it feels like I should be holding a DSLR, and I really feel like I should be looking at a screen. But it's not a DSLR, it's an SLR. So things on the back are, as you'd expect, there's no screen back here, unless you have the quartz date back one, but I don't. So what you get instead is a lot of space. But there are still some controls. You get a function button here, which lets you scroll through various settings that you can change on here, like manually dialing in your ISO for the film canisters that don't have DX coding. And then underneath that, you have here, this thing, your metering mode toggle. Overall, even though there is no screen like you'd expect on a DSLR, it is a very nice, clean design. Right, this is a film camera, and the camera features a pretty foolproof film loading mechanism. You drop your canister in there, and you simply pull the leader until it is at the orange mark there. Close it up, and it'll advance the film to the first shot. And if you manage to mess it up, it'll actually show you on the little sub display there by blinking a film canister. So it's pretty good, pretty friendly. Now, one thing I did notice though was the film counter does not, well, not the film counter, the camera itself does not try to advance the film after the 36th shot. It just begins rewinding. And this is something I noticed on both my rolls. So this, I assume, is just something that it does when it maxes out to the 36. Now, I initially thought maybe it was feeling the tension on the roll, but looking at the negatives I got back, there was definitely space there for at least 2 or 3 more shots at the end. This isn't a huge deal, but I'm personally someone that likes the thrill of seeing how much past I can go beyond 36 shots, getting the most shots out of my roll. Lastly, let's discuss the OVF for a minute. It is quite nice, it is bright, and pretty uncluttered. You got that 7-point AF display and a bottom row info display. Overall, good stuff. Autofocus. The system is pretty similar to older EOS DSLRs. Specifically, it's similar to the 10D system, and it works pretty well. Personally though, I do use this like I do my normal DSLRs, in that I am a primarily focus and recompose kind of person. That said, the system can do some tracking, and if you're someone that is interested in trying to do some action shots with this, a little bit of practice will do you some good. The system itself is pretty predictable, and as long as you can keep stuff in the center point, I think it tracks pretty basic things well. I generally don't think the system is that good if you're letting it decide what AF point to choose, but again, keep things in the center and you are good to go. Now, to accompany that AF system, you have a fairly brisk 4 FPS film drive, which will eat film quickly, but if you are one to do, here's what it sounds like. Nice. Overall, this is actually a pretty quiet SLR. I think it's actually quieter than most of the Canon DSLRs that I have. Haven't verified that, but just from the feel of, or the sound and the feel of this, it feels both quieter and a bit of a duller sensation, which is pretty nice. And the sound itself, I do not mind. I think it sounds like a modern camera, if that makes sense. It's not a huge amount of chunk, but it isn't overly, how do I put it? It's a good noise. Well dampened, mechanically enough feeling, but not an obnoxious sound. We'll go with that. Film and scanning setup. For this review, I ended up kind of blitzing through 2 rolls of color film. The first being the Harman Phoenix 202 and a roll of expired Hauska 100. This is a Kodak Cine film with the remjet removed. Both are scanned on my Minolta ScanDual 4 and edited in Raw Therapy 5.12. Let's have a look at those now. Here's the thing. The ELAN 7E aren't that cheap. Looking online, I'm noticing a lot of these on the auction sites are coming up at around 175 to 250 USD for copies in good shape and are confirmed working, with the ones that are more expensive typically coming with things like boxes. Rougher ones I do see sometimes go for as low as 140-ish, but another thing to consider is that these tend to be fairly plentiful. So as long as you don't mind paying these prices, they're not particularly hard to find. And if you don't like the auction websites, I do see that you can occasionally see these on your used camera websites in the region of 200 USD. Now, there's actually a non-eye controlled variant. Would you believe it's just called the ELAN 7? No E? And these seem to pop around for around 120 to 150 USD. But they seem to be rarer and therefore harder to find than the eye control variants. However, irrespective of which one you get, I do think these are worth the money. They're a modern feeling SLR, because they are a modern SLR, made in the year 2000. And for anyone that has shot Canon DSLRs, you'll feel really at home with these. Although maybe too at home. What I'm saying is that for anyone that is looking for an EF film shooting experience, this gets a recommendation. Now, if you do want to try eye control cameras, but don't want to spend the monies on one of these, there are other models that have it too. Like I said, this is not the first one. So you can have a look at also the EOS A2E or the ELAN 2E. Basically, models that have a little letter E at the end. And like I said, both of these are cheaper than the 7E that I'm holding here. Otherwise, another great alternative for the ELAN 7E is the Rebel 2000. It has the same AF system, metering system, it's just a little more consumer friendly. It's got a lighter build, more plastics involved, and the shutter speed tops out at 1/2000th. But those Rebel 2000s are cheap as chips. They tend to average at around 75 USD, and some of those even include kit lenses. By the way, the Rebel 2000 does not have eye control. Now, if you're on a very tight budget, take a ride back in the Wayback Machine and hop into the era of the EOS 620 or 650. I find these still show up pretty often in thrift stores and yard sales, and if you're a smooth talker, you can get one for maybe a $5 and a smile. That being said, I do want to say that over the course of my photo journey, buying gear, going through cameras, I think I've had maybe like a dozen of either 620 or 650 cameras. I've even been gifted at least one of these in my life. However, if you do want to pay monies for yours, the average selling rate tends to be in the ballpark of like $30 US. So yeah, they're not expensive and they are also very plentiful. But let me know, should I continue looking at cameras that have a 7 in the name? Maybe the 7D? Also, what is your favorite EF film SLR? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, maybe a super thanks if you're into that. Till next time, bye.